Hi everyone! So for today's video, I'm going to be doing my November wrap-up. I read 4 books in November, which is not as much as I'd have liked to, but it ended up being a much busier month than I thought it was going to be. So considering that, 4 books is actually pretty decent. The first book that I finished in November was Daughter of Deep Silence by Carrie Ryan. This is a YA mystery novel. Now the synopsis of this book sounds really complicated, but it really isn't when you're reading it. It's just that a lot of stuff happens in the first chapter, and so it's a very long synopsis. I will try to make it as easy and short to understand as possible, or as short and easy to understand as possible. It's late. So in this book we follow a girl called Frances, and at the beginning of this book she is on a cruise with her parents and her best friend Libby, and while they are on this cruise their yacht gets attacked and everybody on the ship is murdered except for Frances. And when she finally gets rescued, the ship and all the passengers on it are never to be found, so there's no evidence of what actually happened. But when she's rescued, she sees on TV that the governor and his son, who are also on this yacht, survived, and they are lying and telling the public that the ship was taken down by like a rogue wave, and she's just like some teenager, so nobody believes her when she tries to tell them that the ship was attacked. But when she gets back to land, she meets Libby's father, and he believes her, and so they decide that they're going to pretend like it was Frances who died, and she's going to take the place of Libby, and together they're going to try and find out why the governor and his son are lying about this. I know that seems like a lot going on, but that's because all of that happens in the first chapter, and the book actually takes place, I think, 4 years after that, when Frances is grown up and an adult. So yeah, I gave this book 3.5 stars, but the more I think about it, the more I kind of want to lower that to just a 3-star rating. I enjoyed reading this book, and I thought it was like a decent mystery, but overall I wasn't super thrilled about it. I didn't super love the characters. I just kind of found everything about it to be enjoyable but pretty mediocre, so that is why I've kind of lowered my rating to 3 stars instead of 3.5, but I still thought that it was a decent read. The next 2 books I read are part of the same series, and that is The Twisted Ones and The Fourth Closet. This is books 2 and 3 in the Five Nights at Freddy's trilogy. I read the first book in the series last month. It was called The Silver Eyes, and basically this book series is based on a video game series called Five Nights at Freddy's. I think there are like 5 or 6 video games at this point. I've never played any of them personally because nothing is compatible with my computer, but I have watched other YouTubers and gaming YouTubers play all of the different games, and I absolutely love them. I think they're super interesting. Just to kind of give you a synopsis of what the series is about, the video game, you basically play as a night watchman at this pizzeria place called Five Nights at Freddy's. That's kind of like Chuck E. Cheese's, but they have these animatronic animals that in the middle of the night try and kill you and forcibly stuff you into a bear costume where you will die, and you have to like watch them on the security cameras and stuff. So in this book, in the first one, which like I said was called The Silver Eyes, we follow a girl called Charlie, and her dad owned this Five Nights at Freddy's pizzeria, and he made all of the animatronics until one day one of Charlie's friends and a couple of other kids get murdered at this pizza place. Over the years, Charlie and her other friends end up moving away, and the pizza place is just abandoned, and then a few years later all of the friends return and they go back to this abandoned pizza place and they find all of the animatronic animals there, and it just ends up being a lot more sinister than they thought it was. So the first book I rated 4 stars. I ended up enjoying a lot more than I thought I was going to because it is based off of a video game and it is a horror novel, so I expected it to be a little bit cheesy, but I surprisingly really enjoyed the first one. I find animatronics to be very creepy, so that's probably why. So I gave the first book 4 stars. The second book I gave 3 stars. With this book, I found that it kind of missed a lot of the elements that were in the first book. For instance, the friendship dynamic in the first book is just amazing. I really loved it. And in this book, the only friends that were there from the first one were the love interest and one other girl. And I think one of the other friends or two of the other friends might have been like mentioned and possibly made a slight appearance in like the last chapter, but that was basically it. I kind of really missed that whole big friendship dynamic because I want to say there was like 6 of them in the first book, and it was just really nice. They all had their own kind of personalities. They weren't like stereotypes or carbon copies of each other. I really liked the friendship dynamic, and I feel like I really missed that in this book. In the third book, we did see more of the friends come back, but there was still one friend that wasn't even mentioned in either of these books, and I don't know why. It was just like he fell off the face of the planet in these books, but he wasn't in it. So the third book I gave 3.5 stars. I enjoyed this one a little bit more than the second one, but still not as much as the first one. And I think the biggest issue I had with both of these books was that I found it a little bit difficult to follow in 2 senses. One was that during like action scenes, I just found it hard keeping up with what was going on. And then in another sense, in this book, I found it kind of difficult to follow the storyline and like how the mystery was connecting to each other. This was the end of a trilogy. I don't know if they're going to write any more books, but it seemed to conclude itself. But I don't know that I fully understood how it ended and like how all the pieces fell into place. I think I did, and if I did understand it correctly, I think it was a pretty interesting way to end it, but there are also a lot of questions that remain unanswered, but that could also be because I didn't understand it fully. Then like the ending, like the last page, I'm someone who needs like a 25 years later epilogue where I know like who got married, who had kids, what happened here. I don't like open endings. I like to know exactly what happened to the characters like 10 years after the story is over, because I get like very invested in characters and very connected to them, so I like to know like how their story ends completely. And so in this one, in like the very last page, it just felt too open. I just wanted to know what happened next after that because I didn't fully get it, and like I don't want to say too much because I don't want to spoil it obviously, but I just kind of wished it was concluded a little bit more conclusively. It's maybe not the word I'm looking for, but overall I did really enjoy this trilogy, and if you are a fan of the video games, I would 100% recommend it. Oh, and also another thing I meant to mention was that there are like 5 or 6 video games, like I said, and in each one there are like new animatronic characters that are introduced. And in the first book, the animatronics that were in it were mostly just the ones from the first game, but then in the second book they introduced some characters from the second game, which I thought was pretty cool, and also the third game maybe. And then in this book we got characters from I think like the 5th game. It was like Five Nights at Freddy's sister location, which I thought was really cool, and I enjoyed seeing all of the different animatronic characters and just seeing how they incorporated them from each of the games. I thought was very creative. My battery is flashing, so I have to make this quick, but the final book I read in November was Murder on the Orient Express by Agatha Christie. The only other book by Agatha Christie I've read was And Then There Were None, and I've read a couple of her short stories, but And Then There Were None is like one of my favorite books of all time. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars, and so I expected nothing less from this book. I ended up giving this a 4-star rating. I did really enjoy it, and I love the writing and everything, and I always love how her mysteries conclude, like how she ties everything together in the end. I just think is brilliant. But I kind of wasn't fully fulfilled with this ending. I feel like it was slightly anticlimactic, but I still thought it was good, so I'm kind of torn, which is why I gave it 4 stars, because I did think it was clever, but I also at the same time found it to be a little anticlimactic. Either way, I still gave it 4 stars, which is a high rating. Like I really enjoyed it, and I really enjoyed reading it, so I 100% would recommend it. And if anybody wants to leave me some more recommendations for what book I should move on to next by Agatha Christie, feel free to leave them in the comments. Yeah, these are all of the books that I read in November. Leave me a comment and let me know what books you read in November, what your favorite one was, and yeah, I will see you guys in my next video. Bye!